We're very glad to have with us today Luis Hoyos. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Efaisto.
Everyone knows that you've been a photographer before you became a film director, but I would like to, and you know, it's something that we take for granted now that you had this amazing career in photography, but I wanted to go back before that and know, you know, if you could take us back to the moment that you realized that photography was something that could become your job or a big passion in your life. When was that? When did that happen?
Well, my father is from Sparta, and he moved to America in the early 1950s. And like most Greeks that come to America as an immigrant, he worked very hard, you know, labor. He was pushed out by the communists. And he was sort of working below where he probably should have been in his station in life, like a lot of immigrants do, working his way up. But he had to work really hard for a living. And I loved art, you know, and I was in a photography class in high school. And I always thought that I'd have to work really, you know, manual labor like my father. I would help him, you know, we had apartments and we'd do construction and, you know, everything was with your hands. But I loved, you know, using my brain. But I thought I could never do it. And then I was at a photography class in school, in high school, and a local newspaper photographer came and talked. And I started to realize this person gets paid to take pictures. And that was the reckoning. That's where I started working for that same newspaper, and then I was winning national awards as a young photographer. And then everybody said to me, "What are you going to do when you grow up?" You know, everybody wants to be a photographer. I said, "I want to work for National Geographic." And they said, they sort of laughed, like, you know. But back then you'd have a better chance of being an astronaut than a photographer for National Geographic. That's the truth, because they had new astronauts all the time. There had been no new photographers in over a decade at National Geographic. And in 1980, I became the first new photographer that they hired in, you know, about 11 years. Back then, National Geographic had 11 million subscribers. And for every subscription, another 4 people saw it. So 44 million people just in America saw the magazine. That's over, you know, almost 20% of America at that time would see the magazine. Now I came to, then recycling started to take off after that. That was a national, you know, magazine that you could create. We call it water cooler conversations at the offices, just over a single issue. People were talking about it. There's a lot of traffic. They could see how well things are doing because people write in. And but that helped spark, it wasn't the only thing, but it helped spark a movement for recycling. Because there's some real interesting scientific studies where the minority can rule. 10%, the research goes like this. If you have 10% of a committed population, 100% committed to an idea, that's what you need to create social change. And they used it with Arab Spring, they've used it with the suffragette movement, the civil rights movement in the US. So I called the lead writer of that paper, and I said, well, what's with 10%? Why isn't it 6% or 7 or 17%? And he sent me back this whole list of computations, that was, you know, the 3 sheets of algorithms that they used to come up with that theory. And I said, can you give it to me in, you know, I called him back. I said, can you give it to me like in lay language? And he said, well, it's like if you're trying to create steam, you can't do it unless you reach boiling point. We think in Fahrenheit, 212 degrees. And he says, 10% is the boiling point for this exchange of ideas in our culture. So that's what we try to do with film. You know, I've always been interested in using film to drive culture. And, you know, like you know, it's written in the program, but you have, you know, most Hollywood directors see, you know, the audience's butts and seats. You know, you're $10 in a box of popcorn to a lot of producers. You know, that's just how, in America, we drive, the box office receipts are what is the success of a film. If you're a documentary filmmaker, your success is measured by how many people that you change, how much can you drive that 10%? Are you part of the solution to solving these issues? And we still have to, you know, our film, you know, most documentary films never make their money back. You know, when somebody wants to say, "Oh, Louis, I love your films, I want to invest," you know, how much will I make back? And I said, nothing. You know, I said, you're not going to make any money. I said, if you want to make money, you're better off going to Las Vegas. But if you want to change the world, come talk to me. Because that's what we do. We're in the business of changing the world with film. Film is the most powerful weapon in the world for social change. It's, I call it a weapon of mass construction. You drop a bomb, you kill people, you make a film, you create allies. When we made The Cove, which we showed here 10 years ago, nobody knew about that they were killing dolphins in Japan for human consumption. They were killing 23,000 dolphins and porpoises a year for human consumption, even though they were poisonous. It was toxic. They were feeding it to school children. The mayor of that town had plans to put toxic dolphin meat in every school program, lunch program, all over Japan. We stopped that. That's why I make films. I mean, I started it with National Geographic, and I got kind of lost. I think for about 10 years I was really good at what I was doing, but I wasn't doing the kinds of photography I wanted to do. But then when I got into filmmaking, I thought this is a really powerful way to try to change culture.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about The Cove, and I was thinking how passionate you sound about the film. Of course, it makes absolute sense. Well, it also won an Oscar, and it won like tens of awards. I think it was more than 70 awards the film won during its course.
It was the first film that I ever made, and it became the most winning documentary in history. I thought I should have started this a lot longer, a lot sooner. This is like an old timer told me at the time. He said, "Well, you probably would have made shitty films." It took a good 50 years till I had I think I had the confidence to make a film. Because I think I know we're in a photography museum. I think photographers tend to see the world a lot cleaner, a lot crisper than the rest of us. I think it's just because you have to force the world into this frame. And a lot of cinematographers, even I work with now, and I don't work with them again if I don't. Like where you put the camera is so crucial. You just can't just place it and then hope the world, everything falls. You're very careful that every little tiny bit of it has the information in it that you want. And so then when you get those pictures moving, and then you're telling a story with a narrative arc, and then you add the music to it, I mean, it's really, really powerful, but it starts with framing the image. So I've been doing that pretty well for, I was doing it for maybe 35 years before I started to pick up a film camera.
But well, hearing you talk about The Cove, it seems that, making a change, it seems more worthy to you than winning an award. Is that true? Does it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't know that there was so... I'd have heard of the Oscars growing up, but I didn't... we watched them on TV, but I didn't know there were so many film awards. I'll tell you a funny story. Like, the first time I went to pick up an award, it was the Film Critics Award. Critics' Choice. And I had to give a speech in front of all these famous people. It was like, James Cameron was there. Like all these people. The famous American actress? I'm spacing it out now. But like everybody that you've ever seen in your life, they're at this award banquet. And I gave the speech. I spent like weeks, getting it perfect. And I thought, and I delivered it. I did an okay job. And then there's like another award the next week, and then the next week. This went on and on. We had 75 of them, and I realized you can't say the same thing to everybody the same week. So I had to come up with a different speech every week. That was the hardest part of it. I remember this Catherine Bigelow, who was up for the Hurt Locker. She said, "Although you always give," I was at the Directors Guild. I was getting an award, and she was too. She says, "You always give the best speeches. What are you going to talk about if you win?" I said, "Well, I was going to mention this quote I heard about John Ford. John Ford said that making a film is like painting a picture, but with an army." And then when she picked up her award, she used that line, and I thought, "Oh my God, I'm going to have to come up with it." And I was at this table, and we were having dinner before the DJ Awards, and I was like, "What am I going to say now?" And my wife was over there talking. Everybody said we're with celebrities, and you were at the table, and she said, "Why do you talk to these people?" I've got to think of something. And I was going, and I was just blanking out, and they called my name. I was scared. Sometimes you're more worried that you're going to win the award. You know what I mean? When I was going to pick up the award, I saw James Cameron, and this idea had been sticking in my head. I said, "Well, because he'd just come out with Avatar, and he was picking up an award for Avatar." And I said, "Well, the Cove is kind of like a prequel to Avatar. It's ex-military guy goes in to subjugate the natives who are 9 feet long and blue, and he finds out they're more sentient and intelligent, and he develops his army to vanquish his own species. And I thought, but the point was never to win the award. So the point was to try to solve this issue, and we're doing it. You know, so the next film we did was Racing Extinction, about the worldwide extinction crisis. And then I just worked with James Cameron on a film called The Game Changers, which is about food.
Your films, they obviously have a goal, they have a message, but also they're incredibly, I don't know if entertaining is the right word to use, but they keep you on the edge of your seat. And this is something that you aim for, I suppose, in making films.
Yeah. I mean, if Jacques Cousteau, when asked by a producer, said, like, if I give you the money to do this, what am I gonna see? What am I gonna find out? And he said, if I knew, I wouldn't go there. And I like starting with an idea, but I don't know exactly what we're gonna do. And I think it's the discovery, the excitement of discovering that keeps me excited when I go out in the field. If I'm excited by it, I know the audience is going to be excited by it. And that's one thing I think you have to trust as a documentary filmmaker, is that you got to be on that edge of discovery all the time, always asking questions and being able to move around. And to that end, I like to scout a lot, before I even go someplace, just so I have a lay of the land. I know where the sun's going to be coming up. I have because sometimes if you just land in a country and you have to start coming up with a story, that's tough. You have to do enough research to be a kind of a lay expert before you start.
But even research sometimes can, prepare you for what you're going to face there. And I suppose that was the case with The Cove. You said if you learned something was never try to make a film where the subject of the film wants to kill you. So that was a valuable lesson.
Well, actually the first part of that was, when I decided I wanted to be a filmmaker. Well, my best friend was Jim Clark, the guy that started. He helped send man to the moon. He helped us, build the computers that sped him up to. John F. Kennedy called to put a man on the moon, American on the moon, by the end of the decade. This is the 1960s. Jim was putting the cards. Back then, computers were done with punch cards, and he was working up at Boeing, up in Seattle, where they're building the Saturn rocket engines. And he said, there's no way it's going to happen. The bottleneck was there because the computers were too slow. He sped them up by 20-fold to make that happen. He did that in college. He's a brilliant guy. When he's in college, he was teaching at Stanford. He built the first 3D graphics engine, the way that we could design things in reality and computer in 3D, like for make gaming possible, and designing glasses and cars got sped up by many-fold. The day he quit that, he started the first commercial internet browser. The internet, the first commercial internet was him. And I met him when he was building WebMD, and it was the third billion-dollar company created from scratch. And he said, Louis, would you teach me how to be a good photographer? I said, Jim, I'll teach you how to be a great one if you teach me how to be a billionaire. And he would pick me up on his plane. We'd go travel all over the world, taking pictures mostly underwater. He built the best underwater camera. Then he started a company called Shutterfly, made another few $100 million. And we were diving in the Galapagos. And it was the third time we were there, and we were watching fishermen illegally fishing for sharks in a marine sanctuary. And he said, somebody should do something about this. And I said, well, how about you and I? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, we'll use your money and my eye, and we'll make films. And so The Cove became our first film. This is a long way to say it. So I'm real excited. I'm going to be a filmmaker now. So we're down on Jim's boat in the Caribbean. He has the world's largest private sailing yacht, the Athena. It's a 300-foot long boat. And my son is playing on the beach with this kid, Steven Spielberg's kid. And he comes over on this. Steven comes over on the boat with his family, and Steven had made Jurassic Park using Jim's computers. And I said, Mr. Spielberg, do you have any advice for a first-time filmmaker? And he said, yeah, never make a movie involving boats or animals. And then we made The Cove.
Could you say a bit about the films you chose to present here and why they are important to you? Some have preceded yours, but most they came after The Cove, I would say.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I mean, there's, films are really powerful, like I said, and I think if people saw these films that we're showing here and they really, you know, looked at them and were receptive to them. It changes you. You know, you sit in one of the films that we make, you sit in a film like this, it's not like a Hollywood film, it gets your heart rate back up and they get your $10 in your popcorn. Our films are designed, these films are designed to change the way you think about the world. And each one of them, I think, is gonna do that. You know, there's you take them to heart, it becomes part of your DNA. It changes the way you feel about everything. There's a film here called What the Health? It's, you know, why is it in a sort of a program that's more environmentalist? It's because, you know, food is at the heart of almost every massive problem that we have. I don't know about Greece, but in America we spend $3.6 trillion a year on healthcare. About 80 to 85% of it is preventable it's all caused by what we eat. You look at the raising of food for animal consumption causes more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector. It's the biggest cause of freshwater pollution. It's the biggest cause of air pollution. Because when you look at the CO2 and the methane that's coming out of farm animals, climate change. So it's at every major thing, you know, it comes back to food. And so, and by the way, it's a win for your personal health. It's a win for the animals because the average person in the UK eats about 10,400 animals in their lifetime, and these animals are in a complete state of suffering. There's no such thing as, you know, we see the milk cartons with, you know, happy cows on it. That does not exist. That's a fantasy. These animals are put in something that looks like it's, you know, for an animal it's Auschwitz. There's chickens that never see daylight. They're crowded to, you know, you have 8 of them in a little cage the size of this little square of this table here, and you know, so it's a win for the animals. It's a win for personal health. It's a win for the environment. I mean. And it's a perfect way to, and you can change the world 3 times a day, you know, with every meal that you eat. And that's why the Game Changers, that last film I did, it's all about trying. People say, well, I can't be, you know, you can't be healthy and be a vegan or be plant-based, but it's just the opposite. We are, you know, that film just proves that it's normal, necessary, and natural to eat animal products. You know, the world's strongest guy is plant-based. You know, Patrick Baboumian carried more weight further than any, you know, human being in history, 12,050 pounds about, or 1,250 pounds. You carried it to 10 meters. Scott Jurek, you know, says, well, how are you going to get enough energy? Scott Jurek is the most accomplished ultra runner in the world. He ran the Appalachian Trail when we did this film. 46 days to almost 2 marathons a day, 11,000 feet of elevation and decline every day. And he beat the world record for running, you know, almost a 2,200-mile trip. You know, a lot of power athletes. The only weightlifter on the last 2 Olympics was a vegan. And these guys, after they quit animal products, they get bigger and they get stronger. Almost the opposite of what you would think. So it just turns this idea on your head that, you know, to be a man, you have to eat animal products.
Θα ήθελα να κάνω 2 ερωτήσεις. Η πρώτη είναι, ποια ήταν η αντίδραση όταν προβλήθηκε το The Call στις ιαπωνικές αίθουσες από το κοινό, και δεύτερον, γνωρίζετε ότι στην Ελλάδα υπάρχει το πρόβλημα της υπεραλίευσης. Πόσο επιζημιώνει για τη χώρα?
We played at the Tokyo Film Festival, the Cove, and there were a lot of the fishermen, the dolphin hunters were in the audience, and we had a camera in there, like a night fishing camera. And you could see the former Ministry of Whaling in Japan. He wrote a book called On Whaling. And this is I think he's educated at Yale University. And there's a picture of him in the back of the room going like this. Because he just knew that it was like, you know, going to be a disaster for them. But it wasn't widely seen. You know, we were going to be coming out in about 28 theaters, and then these sort of extremists, the nationalists, would show up in these shout trucks, they're called, in front of the theaters, and when they were playing it, and then they would start, you know, yelling slogans, and then the neighbors would start to complain, and so the people wouldn't show the film. But what happened was, so we were heartbroken, right? Because our films, you know, that it was like in 6 theaters. But then the nationalists went a step too far. They showed up at the distributor's home. He wasn't home, but his wife was with the 2 kids. This was caught on national television, international television. This is on CNN, where they showed up with a megaphone at the front door and screaming at him. They went through the house and they shouted him out the back door. And this became international news. And then everybody in Japan knew about it. And it became the best marketing tool for the film that we ever had. So then we had a Japanese distributor, and it started to come up. And then we made 3,444 copies of the film in Japanese, and we gave them to everybody that lived in the town of Taiji, where they do the main dolphin killing in Japan. And we sent these little gift boxes of the code in Japanese and in English, 2 of them, one in each language, to everybody that worked at a Japanese consulate and a Japanese embassy all around the world. So that we knew that every one of them wouldn't see it, but getting back to that 10% number, if you're at an office of 10 people, 1 person sees it, he's going to tell the other person, and I think that's how we had this momentum. And the other question was about overfishing in Greece. I mean, I've dove around here. It's sad what's going on. I asked Sylvia Earle. Sylvia Earle is probably one of the, she's the Jacques Cousteau of our generation. She designs submarines. She was the first female scientific chief scientist for NOAA in America. And I asked her, when I was doing Racing Extinction, I said, Sylvia, where's the best place in the world that you've ever been diving? And she said, anywhere in the world 50 years ago. And, 50 years ago, Greece was probably a really beautiful place to dive, and you can see the degradation all over the world now. There's a film here called Chasing Coral. My friend Jeff Orlowski, he did a film called Chasing Coral, Chasing Ice. Chasing Ice was about the disappearing glaciers. 2 years ago, we lost over 50% of the tropical coral reefs because of a bleaching event. Now, this isn't where the reefs die and come back. It takes thousands of years to build these reefs. Now, this should give everybody a little bit of a feint of horror, I hope. There's been 5 mass extinctions in the history of the planet. A mass extinction is when you lose half or more of the animals on the planet. Preceding each of those mass extinction events, we've lost the coral reefs. And that's because of a buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that's going on right now. Look what's going on right now with the exodus from, sub-Saharan Africa. What's going on in Syria. Those people are going into that kind of, they're being forced out of the farming areas because they can't make a living anymore. What's going on in Somalia is the Europeans are going over there and overfishing, where they used to be getting to make a living fishing. They can't do it because the Europeans have stripped their coast bare of fish. So, I mean, when we look at what's going on, like with overfishing in Greece, I mean, we have to show the game changers here, because really, to me, it's part of a food problem, and it's also part of awareness is only part of it. But you need to, we need to know what we're doing, but we need to know solutions. And one of the biggest solutions that we have is food. A friend of mine, Paul Hawkins, he wrote a book called Drawdown. It's 100 of the off-the-shelf solutions to solving climate change that can be done right now. 8 of the top 20 of them involve food. So, and the 4th best thing anybody can do is become more plant-based. And the top thing is actually refrigeration. By the air conditioners and the refrigerators that are all around the planet are the thing that we can do to change things the most.
We have a question here. Okay. So, Orestes.
So thank you very much for coming again.
Thanks for having me.
One of our main themes this year is the question, why look at animals? Now, the poster, the movies you selected, another movie. So this is the question, why look at animals?
Man is just one species. We call ourselves Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens means the wise ones. And you have the most dominant creature on the planet, maybe not the smartest, because intelligence. If you think of intelligence as your ability to adapt to your environment, how smart is it when we're causing an extinction of a species, making it so difficult to live on the planet that we make it almost uninhabitable for all these other species? There's about 30 million species or more. We don't even know by an order of magnitude how many species are on the planet, but we're losing them faster than we can describe them. By the end of E.O. Wilson, a famed biologist, says that two Pulitzer Prizes for his writing. He says by the end of the century, we could lose half the species on the planet. I mean, how smart is that? I don't think our role on this planet is to dominate other creatures. I don't think our role on this planet is to look at them as food. We call it seafood. When do we all say, let's go out and get some land food? It's like, I don't look at the animals anymore as something that should be eaten. I think we should be taking care of them. We should be taking care of the environment and looking at it. Future generations are going to be looking at us and say, Mom, Dad, you knew this was going on. Why do you do something to prevent it? And I look at, I always fascinated with World War II, and you think, well, where were the good Germans? You knew they were out there. They were watching the trains go by. And we're watching life go by. We're watching these species get vanquished. And it's under our domain. It's on our watch that this is happening. So yeah, I mean, my grand theory is that if we can get enough people to watch these films and to take action, we can create that 10% number so we can actually go about changing the world to become the place that we actually want our children to live in.
I would like to ask about distribution. Regarding documentary's influence, you need to have a strong distribution for the audiences to reach it. And especially when there are very powerful people out there that they don't want to make documentaries. How do we achieve that?
It's a really good question. I have to be careful how I say this because you need distributors. But what I've been learning more and more, I'm going to tell this story. Why not? I wanted to show a film here at the festival, Chasing Coral. It's owned by it's a Netflix original, and it's owned by them. And I know Jeff Orlowski. He's a good friend, and they didn't want us to show it here because for whatever reason they were done with it. They were done marketing it. It's like coral reefs are still dying. Jeff didn't make that film because he wanted to make money. He did it so he could change the world. And now you have a distributor who has a different calling. And so they said, don't call the producer or director on this, and we did, and we got it in the festival. But to me, it enrages me that you have an impact film. You didn't do it. You're not going to make money on a film like that. But then now they have the distributor holding it back from getting out there to a population. It changes the way being in this festival, it changed the way I want to distribute things now. Since that experience, I've been telling all the investors in our film, or the sponsors, I said, I don't want your money. I want your money, but you're not going to get it back. Because I don't want, if you're doing a film for, let's say, $1 million, and 80% of it, $800,000 is sponsorship, but a couple of people want their $100,000 back. That you have to sell the film, and so now you're going to be committed to have to sell it to somebody who's going to use that leverage to hold it up. And then if it's Netflix, might seem like a great venue to have most films, but they're not in China. Very little in the Middle East. Very little in India. And if you're doing a food series like we're working on, that's half the world. I want my films to be seen everywhere. I want it to be, and I don't give a damn about money. All I care about is, at the end of the day, nobody's going to look at our box office and say, hey, well, how much money did you make for your investors? I don't give a fuck. I care about changing the world. I care about moving, people. So I told the investors that, that we're in the business of changing the world. Like I said, that I don't want to be on one network. I want to be on Netflix, but I don't want to sell it to them, so it's held up there. I want it to be on Discovery. I want it to be on National Geographic. I want it to be on Amazon. I want it to be on iTunes. I want it to be on, you know, the Disney Channel. I want it to be everywhere I possibly can. So I'd rather give it away and have the ability to show it at a festival, to show it at a seminar, to give it away to school kids. We have a educational campaign for Racing Extinction. 44,000 teachers downloaded that film and showed it to 2.5 million school kids, and we're still going with that. But we had to wrestle that back from the distributor, Discovery. So, you know, and so I don't look for people trying to like distribute films the same way. I just say, you have to look at your end goal when you're making a film. What do you want to do with this film? Do you want to just do it, say you're a filmmaker and make the money and, you know, be happy to point your friends to it? Or do you want to change the world? I mean, I know this sounds really grandiose, but that's what I'm in the business of doing. I don't look at making a movie. I want to say how can I get to that 10% impact number? How can I get, you know, 10% of the population of America to see this film, 10% of the population of the planet? You know, Racing Extinction, it was the highest price to be paid for a documentary to come out of Sundance in 5 years at that point, and it made 37 cents on the dollar. You know, that's not a good, you know, it was a good money for a film, but for a return on investment, 37%, you'd be out of business. But we're in the business of changing the world, so we're still in business until we're trying to put ourselves out of business. That's the business model that we have, is that if we do a really good job, I'd love for Taiji to close down and Dolphinariums to close down, and we could move some of our team onto other issues, but we keep on, you know, there's no shortage of issues to work on.
We have time for one last question that might be here.
Hello. Actually, it's good weather, we can see. We have 90 degrees, but a week ago it was -2, and we all know that has to do with climate change. And it is also well known that Donald Trump is adamant in not signing the Helsinki Agreement. To be more precise, I think he has stepped down. So I'm wondering if politicians, people who have the government, realize, are fully aware of how serious things are. And I would like to know, what do you think?
And if I may add something to that, it's really interesting because on your photography side, there are all these photos of Donald Trump that you have taken in his world. So you knew the man before maybe he had these aspirations of becoming the president.
Yeah,
so
he was an ass back then too. No, he was. I mean, he was. I mean, I met this guy. Several times I photographed him in New York, and he's just full of himself. He's everything that you probably think of him. I mean, he's a joke to at least half of America. And I mean, it's not a joke when he's causing that much damage. But I mean, all around America, people are realizing that, you know, we can't rely on the federal government, but we're keeping the fight to the states. When the last election that brought us Trump, it also brought us these referendums that we got on the ballot to keep endangered species from coming into America, so we closed up those loopholes. You know, we're working state by state, city by city now, instead of relying on the federal government. And you know, he's not going to be in very much longer. So you know, I think we're working towards the eventuality that we'll have another president there, a Republican or a Democrat. You know, because Republicans, 70%, over 74% of Republicans now believe in climate change. So it's just because you have one guy in there, it doesn't, you know, he's going to slow things down, but he's not going to stop it. The movement's inevitable. I mean, you know, technological innovations, good ones, take about 10 years to happen. Tony Saban, he's a futurist. He shows this. I heard him talk. He showed a picture of Broadway in New York, Broadway Avenue. Easter Parade of 1905, and you look down from the building, and it's a sea of horses. There's one car in this bunch, and 10 years later, you know, Easter Parade, you know, same time 10 years later, and it's like, you know, it's like find the horse. If you know, 2007, the iPhone came out. People are like, why do you need an iPhone? You know, but we were punching the #1 key 6 times to get a capital C. And you know, here it is 12 years later, and like, you know, you can't find you probably spend 3 or 4 hours a day on your phones, doing all kinds of things. It's invaluable. We were smoking on planes in 1995 in America. You know, things happen pretty quick, and Donald Trump's going to go the way of the horse. He's going to go the way of the flip phone. He's going to go the way of we'll cast away like the manure of those horses. Believe me, he's going to disappear. You know, it'll be a bad memory.
And that's a positive message on its own. I want to thank you very much for being here.
Thank you all. Happy to be here. I just want to say one more thing. You know, when I was a kid growing up, we had a very small Greek community, only about 12 families, in the town of Dubuque, Iowa, where I was born. But I think one reason I'm here is because there's so much love in that community that the Greeks just had something about life that the other people in the world didn't get. You know, we don't have that in America. We don't have that, you know, at least that sense of what it means to be a human being. So just don't forget what the Greeks have. You know, you have a lot going for you. You know, it's a financial dip right now, but what makes us really human is that we care for each other. And the Greeks that I knew back in America, it was a strong community. And that's what it's going to take to get us out of this stay together, and we'll get through it all.
Thank you very much for inviting us.